Professor Fatimah Lateef.
Mr. Speaker, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, defines long-term care as the care for persons needing support in multiple facets of living over a prolonged period of time. Sustainable long-term care requires the following three elements. First, financing. Second, delivery. And this is where we need the three C's: the capacity, the capability, and the coordination. And thirdly, regulation of some form. In many countries today, the distribution of care is shared between the public, private, and people sector. In Singapore, co-sharing is between the government, the individual, and the family, and it's a model that we are quite used to. Essentially, the following four modes of funding are utilized for healthcare: government subsidies in different forms, MediSave, basic healthcare insurance, which is our MediShield Life, and fourthly, MediFund for those who really cannot afford and have no other sources of assistance. Now, for long-term care, ElderShield is the scheme, and now with a migration to CareShield. The demands for long-term care will increase significantly with our aging population, the coming of age of our baby boomers, and of course, the population and others who may develop complications of chronic illnesses, which we have a lot of. Financing will always put a high demand on governments on various platforms. And in this aspect, I have a few queries and clarifications pertaining to the bill. Firstly, starting off with a fundamental question. The CareShield Life scheme, which is a migration from the ElderShield, is compulsory for all citizens and PRs of Singapore born on or after the 1st of January 1980 and are at least 30 years of age. Can the Minister explain on the decision and the rationale for the cut-off at 30 years? This is because with ElderShield, we earlier saw that it started at 40 years. This is a difference of 10 years, and it would be useful for us to understand the difference of 10 years and why we're starting a lot earlier with CareShield Life. From a medical perspective, I can certainly understand that, but perhaps maybe from a financial perspective and an administrative perspective, we can get a better understanding of this. Secondly, what happens with a person who is eligible for CareShield Life but lives or works long-term overseas? What types of processes do they have to go through? Can the Minister also outline the steps and requirements for those who are alone and in nursing home and for those who have no next of kin support? Pertaining to the disability assessment, on what grounds can the assessment fees be waived? Are there steps or application forms that the applicants will have to pay for such waiver? And please also review the process and make sure that it's simple enough, because many of them can be illiterate or they may not be able to understand what is being asked and may not even have next of kin. On that same matter of assessment, some of these people with disability are still in the process of review. That means their disability has not reached a stable state and they will need regular review in our healthcare institutions to make sure that it is not progressing further. And Minister did mention that we can have data obtained from our healthcare institutions for those people who need regular reviews. But then again, is this sufficient, or would they have to pay every time they need to have an assessment done by one of the appointed assessors? So that part is something that most elderly and those with disability and members who are disabled in their families are concerned about. Now, one new change is that with effect from 2020, there is a possibility of withdrawal of some 2,400 per year from the MediSave account, subject to having a minimum of 5,000 in the account. Minister did mention that the patient's or the disabled person himself, as well as the spouse's account, can be used. How about parents, siblings, and children's account? Can these also be tapped on? Because I think most family members would want to support the disabled member in their family. Can I also ask the Minister on what are our plans moving forwards for long-term care at home? We can do so much more in this area, which is an option besides institutionalization. What kind of further support at home in terms of training, respite for caregivers at home who need a break from the caregiving process, are we able to assist our families with? Also on the issue of capacity, even in the step-down care area, whether it's at home or in institutions, how are we planning to cope with the supply of manpower? Today alone, we are highly dependent on foreign nursing and caregiving workforce in these areas. So how sustainable is this, and what are the supplementation and injections are we planning moving forwards? Finally, with the definition of disability in this bill, It does not really categorically cover mental and psychological incapacity and disability. We know that for people who have very severe psychological or psychiatric problems, they may not even be able to perform the activities of daily living. Therefore, perhaps there is also a need to review and align this with MSF and other ministries and see how we can assist these families as well, because the number of people with psychological disability and severe forms of psychological and psychiatric disabilities are increasing and bound to increase further. Now, there's been some issues raised about the number of activities of daily living that we can actually include under our consideration for certain schemes, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4. Well, perhaps I would like to urge the ministry to consider, even for people who have less than 3, perhaps 2 activities of daily living that they cannot fulfill, perhaps we can give them a case-by-case consideration, because in considering ADL, it is a spectrum. It can be from the most minor to the more severe. Therefore, perhaps for those with 2 disability, but they are relatively severe, at the more severe end of the spectrum, we could consider giving them the assistance or enrolling them in the scheme as well. Now, sir, in Malay, WHO dalam tahun 2015 telah menetapkan bahawa kualiti penjagaan berpanjangan atau long-term care ada kena-mengena dengan 2 faktor, iaitu 1, jenis penjagaan yang diberikan, dan yang kedua, kurangnya integrasi dengan servis-servis penjagaan kesihatan yang lain. Dari itu, saya ingin bertanya kepada Menteri sama ada kita dapat fokus terhadap aspek-aspek ini dalam perancangan lanjut sektor ini. Sebab sektor ini adalah suatu sektor yang begitu penting sekali. Hingga hari ini, walaupun telah banyak skim-skim yang telah diketengahkan oleh pemerintah dan kementerian dari segi penjagaan berpanjangan, ramai di antara masyarakat kita masih tidak faham dan tidak fasih tentang apakah skim-skim ini. Jadi lebih banyak mesej-mesej dan pengajaran serta iklan-iklan diperlukan pada pendapat saya. Jadi kita terpaksa melakukan lebih banyak sesi-sesi dialog dan juga rundingan-rundingan seperti case studies di mana kita dapat menunjukkan cara-cara untuk keluarga kita, terutama sekali keluarga berpendapatan rendah, dapat mendapatkan bantuan dari skim-skim yang baik yang ada dari kementerian kita. CareShield adalah suatu skim yang boleh memberi bantuan kepada keluarga-keluarga dan jumlahnya tidak sikit, sebab ianya bermula daripada RM600 sebulan dan akan ditingkatkan berperingkat-peringkat. Jadi kalau kita tahu bagaimana kita dapat menggunakan bantuan dari skim ini, kita harus cuba menggunakan grant-grant dan skim ini untuk keperluan kita dan juga keluarga kita. Sebab perbelanjaan untuk jagaan kesihatan yang berpanjangan adalah memang tinggi. Akhir sekali saya ingin bertanya kepada Menteri, dalam Belanjawan 2019 telah diumumkan bahawa $5.1 bilion akan diperuntukkan bagi Long Term Care Support Fund. Berapakah lama jumlah ini dijangka akan dapat menampung rakyat Singapura? Dengan itu, saya menyokong bil ini. Thank you.